Hello?
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hey, Angie? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, hang on. You're really low, really quiet. Let me turn you up a bit. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
I hear you just fine. Yes, you're very
Okay.
clear.
Sorry, I had to turn you up a bit on my end. So, how are you?
Usually my husband's trying to turn me down. He's like, "You're too loud." I go, "I have earbuds in. I can't tell." Doing very
You
well, thank
those
you.
people who walks around with earbuds all the time?
You know what? Since we've been, remote working from home, I have them in pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
But outside of that, no, no, I don't normally do that.
Well, I have a microphone for podcasting. I have
Mm.
headsets for phone calls. I have my AirPods for other. It's like you never know what I'm going to be wearing depending on who I'm talking to, right? It's
There
always a
you
different thing.
go.
It's like I have too many devices and too many
Yeah,
things. And I have two
your
cameras now.
microphone, yeah, your microphone sounds great though. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, I use a little vocal processing. I'll send you the link. It's called
Okay.
Voice.
No, that's awesome.
Anyways, good to finally meet you. Sorry about
Yeah, you too.
the scheduling snafus and everything like that. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Sure. Angie McCourt, I've learned how to not say that the job is who I am. Because after being with a company for 21 years, I started realizing that I would say, I'm Angie McCourt with TechData. Da, 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 da. No, I have other things that I am. I'm a mother.
Yeah, yeah,
I was a small business owner. I have lots of other things too. But no, I think, in reality, like I'm an enabler and I'm a connector. I love connecting people. And I've learned that the power of connection is so amazing, not just in the tech industry, but in community and in programs and things that I've found passions for over the years. And working with Tech Data for 21 years has been a really amazing journey. And it's allowed me to explore lots of different areas, like where I'm at today. That this job didn't exist 6 months ago. What I had 6 months ago, that job didn't exist 2.5 years ago when I started that role. Um, and then even just some of the traditional business roles that I've had, within Tech Data have actually given me extra special assignments that I've been able to go out and explore all new areas of creation within the company, as well
nice,
as just being able to get to know the organization and a lot of the folks inside of it, which is pretty cool.
fantastic. So, what do you do? What does Tech Data do? I mean,
Yeah,
the name
Tech
is
Data.
the name is so generic. It's like Company Inc.
So it's actually a 46-year-old company, so blame the original founders. But
Yep.
it's a technology distributor. So we're kind of like the middleman inside of this value chain from the vendors or OEMs who manufacture technology products to our resellers, which we don't actually touch the end customer. We actually sell to the reseller. And it's really interesting because the model has evolved so much over just the past 5 years and just the past 2 years, even. When you think about how technology has evolved from traditional legacy infrastructure and product to now solutions to now SaaS and so much in the cloud. From a solutioning perspective, it's just been amazing. And so there's a reinvention that has to happen along the way because we were always known for we pushed boxes really well and we were a big volume bank. We helped our vendors to be able to go to market in a cost effective way. Well, we've had to reevaluate and change that value proposition a lot. And now, I mean, we don't manufacture anything. We don't have patents. Like our IP are our people. And
Mhm.
so that connection and that value that we add to our customers and through the value chain and to our vendors is really the fun part of being in distribution. So it's not just like the old boring, like sitting in the middle and all you're doing is, lollying, stuff across the tennis net or whatnot. It's
Yeah.
really been an amazing journey to be able to go. And we were just acquired by a private equity firm back in the summer. So we went from a public company to a private company. And this is the first time we've played that game. So that's been a really interesting journey as well.
Very, very cool. So tell me a little bit about this hashtag your gifts.
Uh,
what exactly
yeah.
is that? A little more detail.
Hashtag love your gifts is something that I'm passionate about. And it's really about um, just, taking the traditional way that in corporate settings and business settings, in community settings, I've sat on quite a few boards where I see this, as well as education, higher education in particular, I work with a lot. And really what it comes down to is how we've all been programmed to squash our really authentic gifts and sit in a checkbox in professional development. And
Yep.
and what it does is it really limits the ability that you can, really, I would say, offer people to bring to the table, which in turn gives your company or your customers or even your value proposition so much more value. And so it's been an interesting journey. And I found getting frustrated, with like, I don't want to be in a checkbox. That's not who I am. I'm very intuitive. And I use that. And I've used that in business for a long time. And my track record shows that it actually works. So,
Mhm.
but also I think too, as we've gone through our transformation with TechData, it's been really interesting because transformation is a mindset. It's not just about let's just do things differently. That's not the checkbox approach. It is about evaluating and adapting and being flexible, and really just allowing the fluidity of thinking and shifting and transitioning to happen. Because if not, guess what? You're going to hit the resistance. And the other thing too is you're going to keep people in this box that's still over here, and you've now taken off and you've left them behind. And so, we hear these words like upskilling your organization as we shift to automation and shift to digitization. But if you're still holding them to the checkbox of, are you a good decision maker? Do you know how to problem solve? Are you a good communicator? No. Are you a messenger? Are you a storyteller? Are you like someone who's decisive, which by the way is extremely different than decision maker?
Mhm.
And those are the things that I really tried to tackle in hashtag love your gift. So I launched the idea in a blog post series a year ago. I have 7 blog posts posted and published out there. And then I'm working on a book. So I'm taking and
Nice.
expanding that like 3 times what those gifts kind of cover, as well as just, a methodology around how can we break through this old way of, kind of keeping people limited. Taking them, we hire them because they're creative. We hire them because they've got this flair about them that's like very curious, and or they've shown ownership or accountability and things. And then we put them in this box and we say, now you have to do everything exactly the way we want you to. And
Yeah.
this isn't just tech data. This is a global issue.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this is something that, what it does is it squashes those gifts. And by the way, that person 10 years in is like, I'm not happy with this job anymore, but they're not realizing it's just because they can't be their authentic self.
Yeah.
They can't
10
bring
years
any
in, almost like 10 minutes in. if you ask me.
exactly. Yes. Yeah. Oh, it's so true. And then they just hop from one company to the next and they're still finding this same issue,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
my goal is to revolutionize authenticity, because that's really the key here is allow people to be authentic. And we're moving away from hierarchical and structural, patriarchal, programming and conditioning ways of things. And by the way, this whole pandemic is enabling that, shift away, because it's giving us different freedoms and it's liberating us to work in different ways and collaborate and communicate in different ways, as well as bring ideas to the table in different ways, right? Because we're not sitting in a conference room or a boardroom anymore. We're having to get creative in how we storytell. We're having to get creative in how we use the data. We're also having to get really super creative in predicting the future, because
Mhm.
nobody can nail it.
That's
Good
right.
luck with that. You better start using intuition or you're going to go under.
Exactly. Exactly. So tell me a little bit about how the transition, because it sounds like everyone is locked in these boxes today, especially in these major corporations. How do you transition to this new model? I mean, it sounds like it's almost impossible to convince somebody to go that way.
Yeah, I think one of the really great, I would say there's 2 great movements that have already kind of been in flight that will help enable this. One are our millennials. They have a different way of being. And by the way, they've been very clear on their expectations since they started in their careers. And I think that's starting to push, number one, the leadership style to be more authentic. Um, to be servant leaders. And I'm even pushing, like, let's get past even servant leadership, because people can still fit in a box on servant leadership, but it's not authentic. You know,
Yeah.
you can say, I'm a servant leader, but it's not truly authentic. And by the way, people can read right through that, right? But the other piece is that there is, I would say, this strength of shift happening that is, it's necessary to allow people to show up and be who they are and bring their gifts to the table. Because if not, guess what? You're wholly accountable for the fact that when you fail, it's because you made the decision to keep people down. It's
Right.
because you didn't allow those gifts to come out. It's because every time that person said, warning, warning, you know, there's something that's going to happen here, and you weren't looking ahead far enough to say, maybe there is, I should probably come up with a backup plan, and instead just went your merry way and your particular way. Eventually it's going to catch up to you. And you're, as a leader, you're going to be like, oh boy, I should have listened to my team. I should have listened to that person who was that messenger who was trying to give me, you know, the advice and the notice. But you know, it's the other part that's interesting too, that I think is happening is, you know, in business, everything is so short term. Everything is about the day, the week, the month, the quarter, the year. And I think companies are really starting to realize that they have to be longer term in their strategy and in their vision, because if not, they're going to disintermediate themselves completely from whatever industry they're in and whatever business model, because the business models are getting disrupted daily. And if you're not thinking ahead, then you're going to be out. You're going to be done. And we've seen that happen over and over. And we don't even have to go through examples. People have now been ingrained with the examples of this.
Yeah.
And even now it's like, okay, so what's that company's next move? Like now we're starting to anticipate, where are they going next? Where's Netflix going next, right? Now they're already producing, right? They're the creator now. So what's next after that for them? So we're already anticipating this. Well, when you think about what's needed to be able to do that, you're going to have people that are edge walkers. And that's one of the gifts I talk about. You're going to have people that are willing to go walk along between today and what's this tangible thing we're doing today and who we are, and then the future, which could be 1,000 different things. But without those folks, we're not getting the vision. And then it's hard to pull in the big picture. So you're going to have the edge walkers that are going to play a big role in this. And then you're also going to have, you know, the challengers, because we have to challenge status quo to be able to shift into this new world of you know, different business models, going to market in a different way, who our customer is and how we engage with them. And it's interesting, when I ran the Cisco practice at TechData, one of the biggest things that my team and I kept our heads on straight with was, we are not creating our value proposition and go to market because we think it's the right thing. We do it because it's what the customer is saying they need. And so the customer is going to be an even bigger part of everybody's journey in the future. Because if not, guess what? Disintermediation happens.
Yeah,
You're not needed.
I think that's what you see happening a lot, is that, you know, the customer is here and, you know, you're here, and these things, you don't go to meet the customer. I mean, some companies do it. So they understand that they need to change to meet the customer, not just halfway, but all the way. They just say, you know, we're a bank, or we're a healthcare company, or we do our thing, and they just don't go the rest of the way to meet the customer. And I think that's essential. That has to happen.
Yes. And so, I mean, take industries like wealth management, for instance. There were no women that were your wealth managers 10 years ago. Well, guess who most of the customers are?
Yeah.
They're women. So guess who the wealth management companies are starting to hire, train, and really skill up? Women to be the wealth managers. So there's this
a bit late, isn't it?
A bit late, totally a bit late. Like, I do my own finances. I'm like, I don't trust anyone else. I've been doing okay myself. So, but but that's one industry that, you know, you see that shift and change happening. And then I think, you know, there's so many gifts that both men, women have in them, masculine, feminine energies, essences, we all have. So part of the challenge is we lose some of that when we're shoved in a box. So I can tell you personally, about 2.5 years ago, I was going crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is insane. I feel like a task queen, right? It was home, it was kids. I have lots of college kids now, so you can imagine in the teenage years going into college.
Yeah, mine too. Mine are all in college too.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, right? so I felt this complete drain of my energy. And the reason was because everything I was doing and focused on was basically task oriented. It was to do, to do, to do, to do, execute, execute, plan, plan, plan. There was no creation. There was no creativity. There was no, all right, let's just calm down and balance this thing out here. And it was a really great lesson learned, because I think everybody struggles with this at times, and where we all have, cooperation and collaboration and, these I would say much more feminine essence skills and gifts and energies, is that they're not always used, because a lot of times people think it has to be forceful, it has to be authoritative, it has to be from a decision-making perspective, top down. Guess what? Those are the old days. We have to shift and change, but that means everybody's got to recognize their own energies and what they bring to the table, and when is the right time to bring those to the table.
Right. So, I mean, how do you, so I can see how this works, and I love it. I love the fact that you're basically pulling out the whole self, but how do you get people to agree to something like that? Because everyone's still in this mode of, execute, execute, produce, produce, execute. How do you like put them on pause and say, listen, we need to spend some time doing the creativity. We need to pull the creative, because I think every human being has the creativity within them. It's just either suppressed, or they save it for when they shoot off model rockets on the weekend or something like that. I don't know. It's like whatever they do in their hobby, they just don't bring it into their work.
Yeah.
So how do we bring that in? How do we change the environment within these organizations so that they understand that they need to bring in the full self as opposed to just the box part?
Yeah, I think there's two ways. One is I would say three ways. One is we have to stop the checkbox development. So if your boss says to you, well, let me go through and talk about your strengths, and they are the checkbox stuff, you say, but I also have this, this, and this. So it's challenging the current process and having a conversation and bringing your gifts to the table. And this is the part where individuals are going to struggle, because the reason they haven't been displaying them is because there's some kind of fear there. There's some kind of fear of, well, if I do that, I'm going to be, shamed, or not. It's not going to be recognized as valid, or I might lose credibility because I'm using my gut. I'm using intuition here and not just data 100%. And so I think the individual self and the checkbox in your conversation with your leader is going to be that, shift in that whole dynamic. And I had that, by the way, 2 years ago now, or no, a year and a half ago, with my old president, when he was like, well, tell me about, do you want to use an executive coach? I go, well, I already have a coach, but she's totally different than what your executive coach would be. Your executive, I'm trying to get out of the box. I said, your executive coach would be back in the box, right? I had a genuine conversation. Guess what his response was? He said, how can I support you? And maybe I can get TechData to fund some of your sessions. Holy cow, that's the kind of conversation needs to happen. The second thing that I would say is supporting each other. So the one thing that I always try to do, if I see somebody going out and they're being really creative, or they're on a limb and they're bringing a new idea to the table, I support them. I go out of my way to support them, verbally, vocally, behind the scenes, saying, wow, you know what? You showed a lot of courage today. I know where that message was coming from. You were representing 100 people behind you. And that was bold, brave, necessary. Thank you for doing that. But we have to support each other in this journey as well. And then I think the third part is really about, there's a lot of healing that individuals, we all have to do. And it's the programming and the conditioning. And by the way, I had a great childhood. I love my childhood. But as I look back at little tiny things that were instances of rejection, or some kind of activity or event that happened in my 10-year-old self, that I carried into adulthood. And we do this, whether it's intentional, meaning media, advertising, all the companies trying to make money off of you, and consumerization, or unintentional, meaning your parents, your teachers, anybody you were around as an adult who put something in your mind that said, yep, you're too loud, you're too much, or you don't speak up enough, or you're too shy. All of those things feed our subconscious, and they sit there. And then that moment when we're going to be brave and we're going to come out and say an idea that we feel, or something that we want to do, all of a sudden, boom, your ego says, nope, you better put that away because we know, you're going to come across as too much, or, too out there. And, I think it's been a huge lesson learned for me over the years. I would have that fear of, oh my gosh, but I have to bring this forward. Like, this is the right thing. This is the thing that has to happen, and sure enough, I look back and 10 years ago, it started a whole revolution within the company. And those are the things that I also tell people, go back and reflect on the impact you've had when you made that one statement or that one drive, or you said, you know what, we really should do this. This is something that's important. I'll take it and I'll run with it. And those things then 10 years later, 5 years later, what impact did they have on the rest of the organization or on your business or on people just in general? And those are the things that I think are super important along the journey. But it is effort. It is a lot of self-awareness. It is a lot of overcoming fear. It is a lot of responsibility by the leaders to create safe space. And it's having the conversation about, let's really truly understand what the gifts are. And by the way, don't sit there and just hone in on weaknesses, like focus on the gifts and use your team to the full advantage that they want to bring to the table. Because by the way, they'll be happier. They'll probably be more productive. They'll stay with you longer. And they'll probably bring some phenomenal ideas to the table that you can't even keep up with how much they're bringing to the table.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that you're kind of working on the end result, which is where someone is within an organization when it comes to work. But then if you think about it, prior to education and prior to being hired, people were their authentic selves and they could do, be their whole self. But then educational system puts you down this funnel, and talent management puts you down this funnel, and eventually you come out in this perfectly rubber stamped person, you fit right into this role. And it's like you change the role, but then all that stuff that's happening prior sort of molds you into that slot. So you kind of need to also work on the educational system and on the talent side to make sure that this authentic person at the beginning ends up being the authentic person at the end without having all that programming in between.
It's been interesting. And I have a theory around that exact concept. And I use the DISC assessment, which I have a program that I co-founded with a partner it's a college overlay program of real life, real time. What's it like to be in the technology industry? What kind of skills do you need? What kind of jobs are there, and all of that? And it's awesome. We're getting ready to do our 10th boot camp. It's been 7 years running. But we're getting ready to kick off February 12th with our next virtual boot camp this year. But it's actually accredited. It's 3 credits of internship credit for business students at the College of USF, University of South Florida. So it's a really important program for students. But one of the things that we do in that program is we have them take a DISC assessment. And then we have someone who's pro bono, because we don't make any money off this program. It's all volunteer. Pro bono does this reading, and she basically talks through what does this mean to you? And then we group the teams together. So she actually does team discs. How are you all going to be able to work together? And what do you need to know about the dynamics of your team and the personalities and decision-making communication styles? What we found is that almost every single time that students take this test, and we have students that they're not just 20 years old, 21 years old. We have had some that are 35 and 30 years old, but they haven't been in a corporate environment. Their adaptive and natural selves, basically, in the DISC assessment were equal. They were almost identical. We then take 30 to 35-year-olds who've been in the industry for a while. I've done this twice now. And they're way off. Their adaptive self is so far into what position and who their boss is today. Yeah. Away from their natural state. It's in the actual results of the assessment. Wow. And my theory is that, and I've seen this a lot, by the time you hit 40, you're like, I really don't care what other people think. I'm going to do my job. I've built my credibility. I've built my experience, and I have some wisdom going. So I'm going to do my thing. So you start to come back to this equal, natural, and adaptive state. But in between, what happens between about that third, I use ages because it's just easier to kind of share it. But between, let's say, 35 and 38, you've been in corporate America for 18 years or 15 years by this point. The challenge is that you start to become unhappy. And typically people blame their boss Like they're saying, I'm just not happy because I don't like my boss. Well, the challenge is that they are not happy with themselves because they're not being their authentic self. So they can't show up to work and actually be their authentic self. And they feel like it's their boss, but in reality, it's been the conditioning that's happened for that time frame that they've been working.
Exactly right.
It's
Exactly
wanting
right.
that
I can
promotion.
tell you that right now. I can look back at some of the decisions I've made and some of the jobs I've had. I think, why the hell did I do that? Oh my God. If I knew now what I knew then, it's like I should have just gone down the path I wanted to go down instead of the path that others put me down, right? Or what was expected of me.
Yes, and what we think others expect of us, because there's
Yeah.
a lot of it's in our head. Like we make up the expectations. We're harder on ourselves than anybody else really is. And then the other thing with that is that because of those expectations, which I love the book Expectation Hangover. I think everybody should read that. And
Oh yeah, I love that book too. It's so true.
That's so true. But great learnings for everyone, just from a self-awareness perspective of, what triggers you. Yep, it's typically expectations. But the interesting thing there too is that when we get into this, I would say this pattern of growth within our roles, and then it's all about the promotion, the promotion, the promotion. When we're working on stuff and we're making decisions and we're presenting, guess what we don't want to do? Make a mistake. So we put so much pressure that our natural ability to make quick decisions or to be very decisive now, because we challenge ourselves on it. And now that ego comes back and the fear comes out and it says, hey, you better be careful. You screw this up and you're not getting the next promotion. Your boss didn't say that. You said that. Your ego said that to you,
Yeah, you check yourself. You're constantly checking yourself against what you think is going to happen when you say something. I mean, especially on social media, right? It's like, how many times have you said to yourself, "Ooh, maybe I shouldn't respond to that," or maybe I shouldn't because you kind of have a feeling of what's going to happen, but you have no idea until you do it, and we just stop ourselves. We police ourselves.
Yes, we're so afraid of rejection. We're so afraid of being shamed. We're so afraid, which we should be, because we've been shamed. That's one of our conditions. I love anything Brene Brown. So if anyone wants to really dive into, she's done such an amazing job researching shame and bringing it to light, because it really is a core foundational issue within society. And, I think that it's really, it's amazing to see, though, that I almost feel like there's this sense of liberation when you can overcome some of those things. And even if it's baby steps, even if it's just bringing one idea to the table, finding out the process of how to follow through with that and take that and that creation of something, influencing that a decision or a direction. I think the more that we become inclusive, because that is a great gift, the more that people are going to start showing up in different ways. And, they get invited to the table to bring different ideas. Guess what? They're going to get creative and bring different ideas. They're not going to bring the checkbox stuff. So, those are just, some, I think, really key things that have to happen. But I always, it's funny because adaptive state and adaptive, I would say personality is necessary. Like if I were my authentic self back from when I was 20 years old, I don't know that I would be as brave and bold as I am right now on stuff, for sure. So I've had to adapt, and I think there's an adaptive self that happens along that way. But ultimately, like really, really feeling tied to your values and your beliefs, and your integrity, and being able to work in that way. And that includes on boards, within the community, that includes with different organizations, that includes with, your school PTA. That's a challenging one.
Probably the most challenging.
But it's definitely interesting. But you're right, that hierarchical and structural and patriarchal, it's been around for thousands of years, and even more, the hierarchical and structural is like been ingrained in the workplace over the past 50 years, 100 years. So it's going to crumble. The paradigm shift is happening, and it's a matter of bringing the people along with you into this new environment and this new opportunity for companies to really revolutionize like how they are in the workplace, how they treat their teams, how they use their talent appropriately and effectively.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit about the hierarchical concept because, I mean, I've read a bunch of different things on this, and it's not something that's specific to human nature. I mean, it's a biological thing. So how do you get over the biology of hierarchy? Because it's
Yeah.
still there.
I think ultimately there's with that is personal power gets squashed the further down in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Personal power is really important, I think, to break through. But the other thing is, from the top, it's inclusiveness. It's, really collaboration and all of those things that establish credibility, trust, truth, and just getting things done in probably a better way. I always used to say with my Cisco team, like, if you have to come to me for everything, I will slow this machine down. You guys are innovating, you're strategically moving in motion, you're executing. Like, that's what I need you to do, but I need you guys to own it. And so creating a culture of continuous improvement and empowerment and enablement at the colleague level is probably the most powerful, most productive thing you can do as a company. Now, what that means though, is the hierarchy has to trust the colleague-led innovation. They have to trust the colleagues in what they're doing. They have to trust that they understand the direction from a vision perspective. And that's what the job of the leader is to do, not to dictate every decision.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle that a lot of very traditional leaders have versus where we're kind of evolving and we're starting to see a bit of evolution happening across the leadership is around that control and trust.
Yeah, and
And
but the vision's got to be like we want to make more money, right?
yeah,
It has to be something to improve, people's lives or
yes,
happiness or human flourishing or something like that. I had this problem when I was at Yahoo for I ran their innovation program for a long time, and it's like I said just give us the vision. Like, where are we going? What are we doing? And then just give us that overarching vision and then just let us do it. I mean, we're all adults, we're all professionals, we all, we're creative, we're intelligent, we know all these things. We just need the vision.
yes,
And we just never got that vision. And then some companies, they have a vision, but it's like, oh, we need to make more money, or we need to, we're going to be the biggest this or the biggest that. Or, I mean, where's the human happiness? Where's the,
yeah.
improving our customers' lives? It's just not there.
Mm-mm. And the funny thing about that comment, I literally sent a note to my team today. One of my leaders sent a link to a article about humility in leadership is becoming one of the more like sustainable and productive and trustworthy and servant leader traits. And I responded back of, authenticity is so critical. Humility, vulnerability, all of those pieces are part of authenticity. And I think and I even put in there about this is so important for the happiness factor at work, is that you can have people who are really good at what they do. They hate what they do.
Oh, yeah.
Because they do it over and over and over does not mean they enjoy what they do. But when people feel connected to the value that they bring to the table, and this is where the leader's job is as well sometimes, is you have a vision, but sometimes people are like, whoa, I'm way over here, I'm only doing this. How does that get to that? And in
Yeah.
reality, everybody contributes to it, but you have to sometimes show people how to align their value and recognize their value into that vision. But it is hard because there are so many companies that they're like hiring consultants to come in and create their vision, but then the consultant doesn't really understand how the company is going to execute it. And so when that fails, then people lose trust. They're like, okay, I have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because they
Well, it's
don't work in
leadership's job to create the vision. You don't want to bring consultants in for that. Maybe to execute.
Exactly. But I mean, the point is that there's companies are still finding their way, and people are still finding their way. And I think that ultimately there is a method to this. There is a method at the individual level, there's a method at the team level, and at the company level to be able to support, like, let's show up and do a good job. Let's, we don't have to kill ourselves to do a good job.
Yeah.
And I think that back to expectations, I think that companies need to be really clear on what their expectations are of their colleagues too. After we did an acquisition about almost 4 years ago, like I realized like my some of my leaders were like traveling all the time. Like, why are you traveling all the time? Like, you don't have to come to Clearwater. You don't, what, why are you traveling all the time? Well, that's what was expected in their old company. And I said, well, I don't expect that. I want you to balance home, and I want you to balance here. And, you've got kids in high, a kid going off to college, a kid in high school, you need to be home. But it was interesting because when the pandemic hit and all travel ceased, it's like now they're all like almost detoxing from old expectations and conditioning. And I said, by the way, it'll never be the same because we're going to cut out costs. Like, why wouldn't we? Like, there is no need to travel as much as people were traveling before. There still isn't for anybody that's listening to this. I imagine like our customers are so much more productive and closing more business and have a better home life balance because they're not on the road 70-80% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was doing a project I'm doing my MBA at Stanford, and we were doing a project on, right at the beginning of the pandemic, the pluses and minuses from working from anywhere. And it's like, we did a ton of analysis and a ton of research. And it turns out it was only like one small thing that was a negative, which was you don't get to be part of those serendipitous conversations in the office where you might get this gig or that gig or whatever, because all communication becomes intentional as opposed to, serendipitous, right? But everything else, like the amount of commute time, that people's health, people's welfare, wellness, relationships, like everything was heavily skewed to this is an awesome thing. So I know it's hugely disruptive, but it ends up being, and that's the thing that I find it really interesting, is that whenever you want change to occur, there has to be some disruption that triggers the change, because without the disruption, the change never gets triggered because people just like go on their tracks. So, the ability to use the disruption to change, they say never let a crisis go to waste, right? So this crisis is actually could turn things around if we do things correctly.
Yeah, and I honestly feel, and I just had this conversation the other day about this particular topic about, being able to be authentic and, use your gifts, is I feel like this disruption, is going to open up the doors. It is going to open up the doors for a lot of changes. And, the liberation that you feel just when you start to really unleash your gifts. And I don't mean that going crazy, but really testing the environment and releasing your gifts. And by the way, if you're in an environment where it's that controlled and micromanaged or squashed, get out. Like, they're going to be one of the last.
People don't think to get out is a viable option. It's like, well, I'm stuck here. I can't go anywhere, blah, blah, blah. No, I mean, now's the best time because you can stay at home and you can work for some other organization.
I have seen, I keep an eye on LinkedIn. I watch the movement, right? I watch people's new position. Oh my gosh, this past month has been insane with how many people are starting new jobs and all these companies all over the place. And that's the thing, that it's going to open up competitively. You're going to have a lot more people you're going up against, because it's not just your local area, your local city or whatnot, but for companies to find that talent, they could stretch anywhere. And if they open up their boundaries around, have to be in an office versus not, and even, opening up a small little office in a town, getting rid of your huge corporate offices, that's still a lot cheaper. But you're going to be able to tap into different talent that you never had access to before because you limited yourself. Right. I just hired someone in Michigan like last week. So I've been open to it for many years.
So how do you start, so you're writing a book about this, but how do you start bringing this into an organization? Like, what's the entry point? Like, if somebody wanted to bring this into an organization, how would they do that?
Yeah, I think, part of it is really starting with leadership, because you can start with the colleagues, but the problem is they're going to be battling against like the old way, and the old way hasn't been notified yet. Hello, you got to change, get on board. So I think really, when I envision starting with leadership, and this is something I educate my own peers on, at work, and I verbalize in front of them when people are showcasing their natural gifts. And, you know, it's amazing though, how the mindset we get shoved into these boxes. I love Jennifer Fitta, who wrote BYOB Revolt. So the Be Your Own Boss Revolt. She talks about the box people. The box people are these people who, like, you know, not just people I work with, I'm saying the people in general that put you in these little check boxes, and you know, you have to fit in there for the role that you're in. By the way, you switch roles and now you're in a different set of check boxes depending on what the job is. You know, it's crazy. But I think starting with leadership, and you know, there's even at that level, there's a lot of self-exploration, and you know, I would say self-awareness that needs to happen, and then self-activation. Because by the way, if the leaders unleash their gifts and they're leading by example, guess who else follows immediately? Like everyone below them who was fearful of doing so before. And what that does is now you just scaled an entire organization, because you start with the leaders and you unleash this. But I think it is a long journey. It's a long personal journey for folks. And then it's a long team journey. And, you know, it's a long company journey. And oh, by the way, you get a new CEO in, and they're all of a sudden, you know, a totally different style, which hopefully that the company would be in tune with the fact that they've now shifted. It wouldn't bring somebody in that was old school, you know, and try to take everything back to where it was, because they'll lose everyone. Because now everyone's liberated. They'll be like, I'm not working in a company like this. So now there's your other resume. You better make sure that, you know, as a leader, that you're making these shifts happen, because guess what? If you don't, your teams will. Even now, you know, I moved. I'm not going into the Clearwater office anymore. I told my boss last summer, I said, hey, good time to sell my house. We were going to do it 2 years from now, but we're doing it now. We're going to move an hour north. So guess what? I'll be working remote from now on. And, you know, there are other people that are making decisions about moving to different cities because they were chained to their office before. And guess what? They're not now. That's the first step in their personal power journey is, you know what, take control over where you want to live. And if the work says, okay, yeah, I'll support you on that, then do it. Because you know what, that's your first taste of liberation. And then what follows, who knows? You know, I mean, it's up to you, you know, each person.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it's great that sort of geography doesn't force you to be in a specific place any longer. I think, you know, it hasn't really happened here. I'm in Silicon Valley, and you still see them selling, you know, $800,000 tiny little boxes near the train station. And it's kind of like, you know, these software developers are all living in, you could be anywhere. You could be in Des Moines, you could be in, you know, anywhere in the country and still be very effective at your role. So, you know, one of these days it's going to hit the real estate market, but not yet.
Yeah, it will definitely. But the real estate market, the commercial real estate market, it'll hit definitely. But the residential market's going crazy in Florida. So.
Oh, yeah, totally. Okay, so it's foresight time. Let's look out 10 years. So it's 2031. Is the Love Your Gifts like a massive movement, or like where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I hope so. And I hope more people join in this movement, actually. I'll be retired because I'm close to retirement now. So I will not be doing the corporate job.
Keep pitching it. You should keep, like, that's the best time to pitch stuff is when you're retired, because you'll have all that extra time to be able to just like go on speaking engagements, and you could like that would be awesome. You just start the train rolling. And
so I just got my life coach certification, and I will start a business, and I will write my book, and then that will be a foundation for it. And my hope is honestly to work with companies and work with their leadership teams to make this shift happen and revolutionize authenticity, because that is going to be key. And, you know, I'm establishing and creating a methodology around this, which I think will really be important, because to your point, you know, how do you do this and how do you make it stick is going to be critical. And there is such a personal journey involved in this for everyone. Doesn't matter what position you're in, there's such a personal journey involved. You have to have that guidance. And I think that is really important. And then I'll continue to do, you know, obviously thought-provoking posts on LinkedIn, or, you know, I get a lot of response, like people are hungry. And for me, honestly, the reason I did the blogs was more healing for me than anything. You know, it was, I was shedding old skin, and I was like, I feel liberated. I want to share this. but it was also healing for me to be able to go through all those times I either shut myself down on that particular gift, or I thought I was shut down, or I was shut down by someone else, you know. And so those are the things that I'll keep inspiring, because I feel it. I feel the energy. The people are wanting. I said the people as a general term, but they're wanting and they're needing this, and they're ready for it. They're like, enough already.
Yeah, and I think you definitely need to have that educational track and that talent acquisition track, because it's kind of like you get to the end and you have all these, great authentic people working, but if the talent system is still, okay, you fit into all these boxes and now I can hire you. Or if the educational system is, it's great that you're creative, but they want you to do X, Y, Z. So if you could run those tracks in parallel, I think that would be fantastic, because we need that lead up.
And it goes back to sixth grade. In seventh grade, which are some of the most influential years of human life, in the journey. But here's one example in the college program I mentioned, the Exploratory Lab Boot Camp. So one of the things that just drives me crazy is that all of the career centers, like every one of them, tells the college student, 1-page resume. That's it. Now, it doesn't matter how I have a student who's in the upcoming one. He's 38 years old. I'm sorry, but he has way too much stuff to do a 1-page resume. Yeah. But here's the other thing they say.
Very small type, 2-point type.
Put all your education first, and don't put any volunteering. Don't put any unpaid internships. Don't put your part-time jobs. And oh, by the way, do not talk about if you were a competitive athlete when you were younger, or if you were a performing arts, expert or talent. Do not put any of that. Like, we don't want any of that. So guess what? They all look alike. It's like every single resume looks the same. It's all about the education, right? So what Pat, who's my co-partner in the X Labs, what we do is we literally tear it all apart. So we say, we have to build your story. And I've found where, I'll be like, well, what do you do in that club? And they're like, oh, I'm the president, I'm this and that. Okay, well, that's important to put on there. And then, why did you get into technology? Well, because I did an internship. Well, why is that not on here? Well, it wasn't paid. I go, okay, the thing that got you inspired to do your major is not on here. And then, okay, well, tell me more about that. And, then it was this arpit. This is this kid that, he was brilliant. And tell me more about, about this. Well, I ended up joining this, committee, and we became a competitive team, and we went on to the global championships. And I go, why is that not on here? It was a technical thing. Why is that not on here? Well, because they told me not to put it on there, because it was, I didn't get paid for it. Okay. And then for 10 years, he went with his mother. He literally would go volunteer every weekend to feed the hungry for 10 years. Why is that not on here? Because that tells character. That shows so much about a person. We literally tear these resumes up, and we get to know the students and help them build their stories. The confidence that comes out of this exercise alone, regardless of the 42 different, sessions that they get involved with in the X Lab, it's amazing to see. But we're breaking through. It's just only, 20 something kids students at a time. It's not, hundreds and hundreds, which is necessary, to your point.
Yeah.
But even getting back further into middle school age, I think is so important, and trying to break through some of that conditioning that happens in that stage and age and in their educational, journey is super important, I think.
Yeah. And I think that the reason I think it's important in the talent acquisition piece is because all of this is automated now, right? It's kind of like, if I'm a hiring manager, I'm not even going to see your resume unless it matches all these criteria that the system has already come up with. So,
that's exactly right.
I could come up with an amazing resume that a human being could look at and go, wow, this guy is really cool. Let's hire him. But if it doesn't have all the right words in it and the right number of words and the right amount of C++ experience, it's not even going to get to the hiring manager. So it's kind of like, the systems need to be broken down in all different places. It's like those kind of connections need to be made. The educational connections need to be made. All these connections need to be made across the board, that we're hiring authentic human beings with all these different aspects, and all the should be.
Yes. And you know what goes even further than that, which is so insane? Look at job descriptions nowadays. They're so old and they're so perfect. I'm like, do you really have somebody already that works for you that does all of these things?
Yeah.
Because you just weeded out about 50 candidates that would be awesome at your job
Yeah.
because you put in this weird criteria of perfection. And
Yeah.
you know what's crazier is that we put those job descriptions out there. We go and interview, and guess what we're interviewing based on? Personality, soft skills. We're not even looking at that job description checklist.
Exactly.
We've shifted, but we haven't shifted the process yet.
Exactly. So yeah, a lot of stuff needs to be disrupted for this thing to work. But I'm glad you're moving forward. It sounds fantastic. I'd love to see this, more broadly. But that's what your retirement project, right?
Yes. Well, I'm starting now before I retire, but I am excited. I have the message. I'm supposed to be doing this. This is my purpose, and this is something that I will continue to drive. And hopefully it does actually shift and change. And it may take a long time, but at least getting the ball started is the most important thing.
Well, a lot of these things take forever. Everything takes longer than you think. Yep. That's what I've learned in life. Is that you want something, it's kind of like people like talk about the fax machine. The fax machine was invented in like the 20s, and then we didn't start using it until the 80s. The internet was invented in the 60s, and we didn't start using it until the 90s. So everything takes longer than you think, but hopefully things will start accelerating, because where technology is faster, communications are faster, everything's faster. So hopefully this will accelerate faster. And we need, I think people are realizing that these systems are broken. Education is broken, employment is broken, and talent acquisition is broken. And new ways, they want to try new ways of doing things that work better.
Yes.
I think that's
and
important.
Guess what? They already have the tools to do it. They're not using them, and those are the people.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
They can email me if they'd like. Angela.McCourt, McCourt @techdata.com, TechData.com. Just reference this podcast because I do get solicited for a lot of other stuff and I don't respond to. So,
very cool.
They out on LinkedIn. I'm Angie Beltz, BELTZ, McCourt, McCourt.
Okay, well, I'll definitely put your contact information in the show notes. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, they can do it that way. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation. I love it.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.